It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of self-reliance. An Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
This is our country.
Good evening and welcome again to An Economy of One. I am your host, Gary Rathbun. Joining me now is Mark Perry. He's currently a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and a professor of economics and finance at the University of Michigan's Flint campus. He's a creator and editor of the economics blog Carpe Diem. And at AEI, Mark writes about economic and financial issues for American.com and the I can never say that, AEI Ideas blog. We'll figure it out. I'm sorry about that. Mark, welcome to An Economy of One.
Yeah, hey, glad to be back on the show, Gary. Yeah, it's the Carpe Diem blog, actually, which is part of AE Ideas, but yeah.
Okay. So, I don't know why. I got a mental block on AE Ideas saying that. Okay. So, but Carpe Diem, we visit that quite often. My producer prints off about everything you write. So thanks for joining us. I want to talk a little bit about minimum wage. That's kind of a hot topic for us on the show, and we always get a lot of feedback whenever we bring it up. And you've written several things very recently wrapped around California's minimum wage experiment, but it's all over the country. And let's start with California, because whatever starts there comes our way eventually. How is the $15 an hour minimum wage starting to affect their economy yet?
Well, it's going to get phased in over 6 years, so it'll be kind of a long-term downward trend, I think, in some of their economic indicators. But, it's like this hysteria that is sweeping the country, and I sometimes call it an economic death wish, that these communities and states and cities are imposing this really, bad economics on their markets. Just a few years ago, Obama was talking about $10.10 an hour because it was easy to remember. Now we've gone from $10.10 to up to 15, and no one ever says why 15, why not 14, why not 16. It's just some number that they use. So yeah, I just see a lot of trouble in California. I mean, especially because their state economy is already ranked by CEOs as the worst state in the country to do business because of their high taxes and their high regulations. And so then when you add on top of that a 50% increase in labor costs for unskilled workers on top of all the other problems that they have that make it very unfriendly to businesses, it just doesn't seem like this can work out in their favor. So they're going to go from being the worst state to do business to now an even worse state to do business with these high wages. So I predict a lot of problems out there, and we might not see it for a year or two, but it just is not looking good, I think, for their state economy.
I was thinking about this, and I went to college in the 70s, and when I graduated high school, the minimum wage was $2. $2 an hour was the federal minimum wage, which is the equivalent of 9 something now, I suppose, from a inflation adjustment. I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here. Going to $15, I mean, that's really quite a jump, even if it's graduated in over several years. Is the economy going to catch up with that in the future, where $15 an hour doesn't seem like $15 an hour today?
Well, yeah, but it's going to take a really long time. That's why I've tried to kind of capture the impact, the fact that it's historically unprecedented. I've created a chart showing the California minimum wage going all the way back to 1938 and then projecting it out to 2022. So when you see how high this is going to be and how much higher it's going to be than any level they've ever had before, we're really in uncharted territory here, that this is like the highest minimum wage in the history of the world, pretty much, it seems. Higher than anything ever in the United States, higher than anything in California, higher than anything around any wage around the rest of the world. So it just doesn't seem like businesses are going to be able to absorb the impact, especially when you have companies like White Castle, Vice President the other day said that their stores operate on 1% to 2% profit margins.
Right.
So the math doesn't work out. So people can talk about all the social justice issues and things like that, but it just really comes down to the economics and the minimum wage math or restaurant math of trying to run a business. And when you increase labor costs by 50%, it's just not favorable math, and it has to have adverse consequences on small businesses and employees.
Now, you're an economics professor, very prestigious university. I know why politicians want to raise the minimum wage, because that's easy for them. It doesn't cost them anything, and those people will vote for them. Why is it so widely accepted? Why is there so much economic ignorance out there? I mean, this is kind of economics 101. You raise the price of something, the demand goes down. I mean, you're a professor. I mean, why is the general society so ignorant of these principles?
I think it's because they're completely divorced and separated from any kind of just fundamental analysis, and at least that's what economics gives us, is a framework of analysis. So I've found that even if students come into class and they may have supported increases in the minimum wage, it might be because they've never really thought it through. But when you show them kind of the supply and demand framework, and that's what economics gives us, is this really systematic framework of analysis, then you can really show what the adverse effects are going to be. And I think most students are open to that once they understand the way the market works and the way the unskilled labor market works, they're very open to understanding that this is going to have adverse consequences. So it's like when they make these decisions in a state capitol or in the U.S. Congress, it's like they're never sitting down and saying, okay, well, here's supply and demand framework. We're going to raise the wage by this amount, and here's what the effects are going to be. It's never systematically evaluated. It's always just based on emotion and politics and never on economics and reason and logic.
We're talking with Mark Perry. He's an American Enterprise Institute scholar and creator of the popular economics blog Carpe Diem. Mark, you've obviously studied all this for a long time. Is there ever an event in history? Has there ever been a time, will there ever be a time when we reduce the minimum wage or eliminate? I mean, I'm a firm believer that the minimum wage is zero. Any of these laws ever get dialed back at all?
Well, unfortunately, I mean, like some of these states, they never do this on a kind of like a trial basis. I mean, years ago, in the 17 and 1800s, they would often have what they called sunset legislation, and some law would be put into effect for, let's say, 5 years or 10 years, and then it would get reevaluated. But unfortunately, with minimum wage laws, it's like they're in place, and then they're permanent. The only way it would ever come down is in some states when they've indexed it to inflation, and now that there's been some deflation in a couple recent years, then there have been some cases when it's had to be reduced slightly. But yeah, it can never, they can never reverse or undo the legislation. It always just goes forward, even if it's not working.
Now, we see whenever we start talking about unemployment, I always dig up, and I don't have to dig very far, the articles and research of a lot of these restaurants, especially the fast food, going to automated kiosk where there's very few people. From an economic standpoint, I mean, I can understand that. I mean, you never have to fire them. They never show up late for work generally, that kind of stuff. Is that the trend you see? I mean, more robotics, more kiosks, more interaction from a technology standpoint?
Yeah, sure. That's what we would probably see is for companies to survive and be able to stay in business and be profitable, that capital is always a substitute for labor. And so they could invest in labor-saving technologies, automation as one way to kind of address the higher labor costs from a minimum wage. And then the other factor of people, I don't think understand this, is that we always think of workers competing against employers to get higher wages, but really workers compete against other workers to get higher wages. So when the minimum wage goes up, then what happens is that it gives skilled workers an advantage over unskilled workers, and so then companies would switch from unskilled workers. Since they have to pay a higher wage, they would then hire skilled workers, but then that would kind of cut off the bottom rung on the labor market ladder, and then the unskilled workers employers with limited experience would never be able to find that first job to get the skills and experience to move up, because firms would have an incentive to hire skilled workers instead of unskilled workers, along with investing in technologies that would allow them to reduce the amount of labor they need with labor-saving technologies and automation.
I'm going to give you kind of a loaded question because it's I know the answer from my own personal experience, but how important is it for a future producing citizen to support his family or her family and maybe become an entrepreneur, that kind of stuff? How important is that first job regardless of the pay?
I think it's critical and very important, and by definition, an unskilled worker doesn't have skills and needs on-the-job training that an employer will provide, assuming that it makes it profitable to hire unskilled workers. But then, and often I think misunderstand that we assume people start at the minimum wage, and then 5 years later they're still struggling to make a living at the minimum wage. I mean, most workers who are good are going to get raises, and then they have job skills and experience that would allow them to move to another employer. So yeah, of course, so it's very critical for somebody to get the first step on the labor market ladder, get a job, even if it's low paying, but then get skills and experience that then allows them to then make a better life in the future.
Yeah, and I think you hit a good point. The fact that I'm an employer, I employ a lot of people, and it's a risk every time I hire somebody. And the cheaper I can pay for that risk to find out if somebody's a good worker or not, the better off my business is.
Yeah, I mean, and there's all sorts of examples. The White Castle vice president who was interviewed recently talked about an immigrant who came over and couldn't speak English, but started at White Castle, got a job, got experience, learned how to speak English, and now he owns a couple of White Castles. Right. So there's a lot of those kinds of stories that people start at the bottom, work their way up, but you first often have to start at the bottom, and if you cut out the bottom, then it denies the most vulnerable among us the opportunity to get a job and get skills.
Absolutely. We're speaking with Mark Perry from the American Enterprise Institute and professor of economics and finance at University of Michigan's Flint campus. Mark, I got a couple more questions. I got to take a break. Can you hang on for a couple minutes?
Sure, that's fine.
I'm Gary Rathbun. This is an Economy of One.
This is an Economy of One with Gary Rathbun.
We're spending some time with Mark Perry. He's a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and a professor of economics and finance at the University of Michigan's Flint campus, and creator and editor of the economics blog Carpe Diem. Mark, with all the presidential stuff going on, I mean, you can't hardly blink without seeing candidates do something or say something or something said about them. And it's kind of surprising to me, but not really, given my lifespan so far, that some of the candidates are just really promoting socialistic principles, want the country to be more like Europe, want the government to pay for everything and take care of everything for us. Is socialism winning out? I mean, minimum wage is kind of a socialistic principle.
Yeah, well, it really is, and all of this stuff about trade protection and free college. Yeah, I think we're really moving backward. I wrote an article about 20 years ago called Why Socialism Failed, and it was written with the title in the past tense because that was right after, the Berlin Wall had fallen and the Soviet Union had collapsed, and China was moving towards markets and capitalism. So I said, had an article about why socialism had failed in the past, not ever thinking that 20 years later we'd be talking about this as like a viable way to run the economy. So again, I think it just appeals to people's emotions. When you hear about getting free stuff and free college and a $15 wage, even though you're not worth that much or have no skills, I mean, it just appeals to people in some fantasy world, though, that isn't really consistent with reality. So it's really kind of disappointing to see the young people embracing Bernie Sanders' socialism, and then the people who are really embracing Donald Trump's kind of his protectionism and isolationism, and it really goes against everything that we know about how the economy works and the benefits of capitalism over socialism and the benefits of free trade over protectionism. So yeah, it's very disappointing as an economist to kind of see this economic nonsense and nitwittery that we hear about, like you say, almost every day.
Yeah, nitwittery. I got to write that one down. I'm not familiar with that, but I've said on the show, and I tell people one of the basic premises that some of these people operate on is the economic pie is fixed, and it's so easy for people to believe that's true. If the 1% has, I don't know, 50% of the wealth, then they obviously took it from somebody. They didn't really create it and expand it. Are we getting to the point where the incentives to expand the pie are diminishing for businesses? I mean, the country relies on entrepreneurs and new businesses starting up. Is the climate? I know California. I read your stuff, and California is really, that's their goal, I think. But is the country as a whole becoming disincentivized to be self-reliant?
Well, I still see a lot of bright spots that this is still a land of opportunity, and it's a economy that's based on economic dynamism. I think where we have to look out is for some of the things to be concerned about is the fact that America still has one of the highest corporate tax rates in the industrialized world, and that gives companies some incentives to locate out of the country or hold funds and some of their assets, the corporate inversions. So I think at the big multinational corporation level, we really have to make sure that hopefully we'll have some tax reform to get our highest marginal tax rate down to be competitive with some of the other countries like Ireland and so on. And then, California is kind of a special case because they're so anti-business there. But then you look at Texas, they always get ranked number one as the best place in the country to do business because they have lower taxes and lower regulation. So hopefully, I think that's part of the dynamism of the U.S. economy is you have 50 states competing against one another for businesses and for people and jobs. And so I think we can look to states like Texas and see what a great job they're doing in making that a very dynamic economy. And with the oil industry there and other industries, even high tech now, they've diversified their economy. So I guess we can look at models like Texas as a state that is kind of promoting economic opportunity.
I got about 40 seconds left of your time or so. Real quick, just give me your opinion, and this is, I hope I don't catch you off guard or insult you on this, but what's your opinion of the Federal Reserve's role in our economy and monetary policy going forward?
Well, the one thing that you have to give them credit for is that they have kept inflation very, very low and stable. And so they get credit for that. Back in the 70s and 80s, we had high inflation, high interest rates, very damaging. So at least they've kept inflation low and stable.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. We pick on the Federal Reserve a lot here, so I think they have a much stronger role than what is necessary in the free market sometimes. But
sure,
we've been spending some time with Mark Perry. He's a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute and a professor of economics and finance at the University of Michigan's Flint campus. Mark, once again, thank you so much for spending some time with us. And as always, I have about 6 pages of questions we didn't get to, but hope we can tap you on the shoulder again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I look to coming back on the show sometime in the future.
Very good. Thanks a lot for your time. I'm Gary Rathbun. It's an Economy of One.